My name is Liana, and I'm 41 years old. I realized too late that the people I called family cared more about my wealth than my well-being. I used to think love was something you could build with time, effort, and good intentions. I thought loyalty was a given once you said "I do." But I was wrong. In my case, love came with a price tag, one that grew heavier the richer I became. I live in San Diego, where the ocean breeze carries the scent of salt and sunshine through every open window. I'm an interior designer, and not to brag, but I built my name from nothing. By the time I turned 40, my work was featured in magazines, and I had clients who flew me across states just to redo their penthouses. It wasn't fame that drove me, though it was independence. I grew up poor, watching my mother struggle to keep food on the table. I swore I'd never be that vulnerable again. Then came Derek. He was charming, successful, and confident, the kind of man who made promises sound like facts. He was 10 years older, already divorced, with 2 kids from his previous marriage, Zoe, 19 at the time, and Caleb, 16. They seemed polite enough when I first met them, a little distant maybe, but I told myself that was normal. Blended families take time, right? That's what I kept repeating, over and over, until the truth started leaking through the cracks. The first time I noticed something was off was a few months after our wedding. Derek brought up the topic of shared accounts. "It's just easier," he'd said, pouring himself coffee. "One account for the bills, one for the savings, one for everything else." I didn't see the harm. I loved him. I trusted him. But a few weeks later, I noticed large transfers going out to investments I hadn't approved. When I asked, he brushed it off. "Just some quick trades, babe. Don't worry about it." The thing is, Derek was never good with money. I'd seen his tax history. He had debt. I had stability. Together, I guess, I became his solution. Then Zoe started asking strange questions, innocent on the surface, but loaded underneath. "So, if something ever happened to you," she said once, twirling her hair and smiling faintly, "who would inherit all this? The house, I mean." I remember laughing it off. "Hopefully nothing happens to me anytime soon." She didn't laugh back. Caleb wasn't as direct, but he'd snoop around my office when he thought I wasn't looking. Once, I caught him flipping through a stack of financial statements. He jumped, embarrassed, claiming he was just curious about what a designer made in a year. I let it slide, but it left a knot in my stomach. Then came the conversations Derek had when he thought I was asleep. I'd hear muffled whispers through the bedroom door talk about life insurance, investments, and what's fair. I started to notice his affection shifting. The way he'd count my jewelry when I wore something new. The way he'd smile too tightly whenever I got another big contract. I felt like a paycheck wrapped in a person. My best friend, Talia, saw it before I did. "You're the goose that lays golden eggs, Lee," she told me bluntly one night over drinks. "They're not looking at you. They're looking at what you give." I wanted to believe she was wrong. But deep down, I already knew she was right. The breaking point came one morning over breakfast. Derek was scrolling through his phone while I brewed coffee. Without looking up, he said casually, "We should probably start moving some assets around. For tax benefits, you know? Maybe transfer a few things to my name temporarily, the house, maybe one of the properties." Something about the way he said it, smooth, rehearsed, made my stomach twist. "Temporarily?" I asked. He smiled. "Of course, it's just smarter that way. Protects you if anything happens." If anything happens, those 3 words echoed in my head like a warning bell. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every small red flag I'd brushed off. The unexplained expenses, the whispered calls, Zoe's inheritance questions, Caleb's prying eyes, the constant pressure to consolidate, finances. I got up quietly, slipped into my office, and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen made the room feel colder. I searched for a name. Talia had once mentioned Marcus Holden, an estate attorney known for discretion. I sent him a short email. "I need to make a private will. Urgent, confidential." He replied within the hour. We met 2 days later in his downtown office. He was calm, methodical, and didn't ask unnecessary questions. "You're not the first person to come here with this kind of situation," he said gently. "If you want your assets protected, we can ensure that your wishes are followed even if certain people aren't meant to know." I felt an odd sense of relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking back control. We drafted a new will, one that no one in my family knew existed. I left everything to charity and to Talia, the only person I trusted. Derek, Zoe, and Caleb got nothing. I signed it, sealed it, and stored the original in Marcus's vault. As I held the pen over the paper, I hesitated for a moment. I wasn't sure whether to feel powerful or terrified, but I signed anyway. When I left Marcus's office, I took one last look at the document before he locked it away. The title page read, "The Last Will and Testament of Liana Brooks." I remember thinking how strange it felt to look at something that defined what would happen after my death. As I signed the secret will, I had no idea it would someday be read while they searched for it at my own funeral. It started as an ordinary morning, but by nightfall, I was in the hospital fighting for my life. The morning of the accident felt eerily peaceful, the kind of calm that comes before a storm you don't see coming. The sun had barely risen over the San Diego coastline, and my kitchen smelled like roasted coffee beans and lemon polish. Derek had already left for a meeting, and Zoe and Caleb were still asleep upstairs. I remember standing at the sink, staring out at the ocean, thinking maybe things were starting to feel normal again. Maybe I had overreacted about the will, about the distance growing between us. I grabbed my travel mug, slipped on my sunglasses, and headed to my car. I had a client meeting that morning in La Jolla, a dream project, a penthouse redesign worth 6 figures. I remember humming softly as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine purred like usual. Everything felt fine, until it didn't. The first sign that something was wrong came when I hit the intersection near Harbor Drive. The brake pedal felt off, a little softer than usual. I pressed it again, it sank almost to the floor before catching. My heart jumped, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was just air in the line. I made a mental note to call the mechanic later. I wish I had stopped the car right then. The freeway was clear that morning, unusually light traffic. I was cruising about 60 miles an hour when I noticed the car ahead slowing down. I tapped my brake. Nothing happened. I pressed harder. Still nothing. Panic hit me like a wave. I slammed both feet on the pedal, but it sank flat, useless. I yanked the emergency brake, but the car was already spinning. I remember the sound, the screech of tires, the deafening crash of metal against concrete. Then, silence. When I woke up, everything was white. A harsh, sterile white that made my eyes ache. My throat was dry, my head heavy. A woman's voice said softly, "You're okay. You're safe." I blinked, disoriented. "Where am I?" "You're at Street Luke's hospital," she said. "You were in a car accident." It took me a moment to remember the highway, the brakes, the impact. Then I saw Derek standing near the foot of my bed. His expression was unreadable, a strange mix of worry and something colder beneath it. He held my hand, too tightly, and whispered, "You scared me half to death." But his eyes, they didn't match his words. They were calculating. The doctor came in a few minutes later and said it was a miracle I'd survived. "Your brakes failed completely. The impact could have been fatal." The words "brakes failed" echoed in my head like a broken bell. When the police came to take my statement, they called it a mechanical malfunction. "Could be corrosion or fluid leakage," one officer said. But I'd just had my car serviced 2 weeks earlier. There was no way. That night, as I lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling, I overheard voices outside my room. A man and a young woman, hushed, urgent. Zoe's voice, "Dad, what if they find out?" she whispered. "Keep your voice down," Derek snapped. "Just stick to the story." I froze. My pulse thudded in my ears. What story? About what? When they came inside minutes later, they were all smiles again, pretending nothing had happened. I forced myself to play along, too weak to confront them yet. The next morning, Talia showed up, her face pale with worry. "You look terrible but alive," she said, half laughing through tears. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Lee, I saw Derek last night. At a bar. He wasn't acting like a man whose wife almost died." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "He was laughing," she said. "Drinking with some guy. Talking about insurance paperwork." Insurance. That word again. I called Marcus later that day from the hospital phone. I told him everything: the accident, the conversation I'd overheard, the insurance mention. His voice stayed calm, but there was a tightness to it. "Liana, I want you to listen carefully," he said. "I think it's time we put the contingency plan in place. Just in case." "Contingency plan?" The one we discussed if something ever happened to you, he said. We'll move your sealed documents to the secondary location. And I'll prepare a statement to be released under specific conditions. That was the first time I felt genuine fear. Not suspicion, not unease, real, visceral fear. Someone wanted me dead, and the people I loved most had motive. When I was finally discharged, I came home to a house that felt foreign. Too clean. Too quiet. I moved slowly, still sore from the crash, and noticed small details that didn't fit: the faint smell of bleach in the garage, a new wrench lying near the toolbox, the trash bin half filled with oily rags. And then I saw it. A coiled piece of tubing sticking out from under a pile of paper towels. I pulled it out, my fingers trembling. It was rubber, sliced at one end, the kind used in brake lines. My breath caught in my throat, my knees nearly gave out. I dropped it, backing away as if it could bite me. I knew then that what happened on that highway wasn't an accident. Someone had cut my brakes. Someone in that house had tried to kill me. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the evidence in the trash, hearing Derek's voice in my head saying, "If anything happens, I should have gone to the police right then." But fear and shock paralyzed me. Who would believe me without proof? Derek was charming, respected. I was the emotional wife recovering from trauma. I needed a plan, and I needed to stay alive long enough to execute it. I grabbed my phone, snapped a picture of the brake line, and sent it to Marcus and Talia. No words, just the image. Talia called within seconds. "Oh my God, Lee, are you sure that's?" "Yes," I whispered. "They didn't just want my money, Talia. They want me gone." When I returned home, I found the brake fluid line neatly coiled in the trash. Someone wanted me dead. If they wanted me gone, I would make sure my absence would ruin them. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay in the dark, staring at the faint outline of the ceiling fan spinning above me, hearing its blades slice through the air in rhythmic whispers. My heart wouldn't settle. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside the window made my skin crawl. I kept seeing that severed brake line in my mind: black rubber, slick with residue. Proof. Silent, damning proof. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't rely on fear or shock anymore. I needed control, and control meant preparation. The first person I called was Marcus. He answered on the first ring, his voice calm but alert. "I saw the photo," he said immediately. "Liana, you can't stay there." "I can't just disappear," I argued. "That would make me look crazy. I need to stay until I have evidence strong enough to take to the police." There was a pause on the line. "Then we need to make sure that if anything happens to you, everything falls into place exactly how you want it to." He was right. If Derek and the kids wanted me gone, they'd make another move. And if they succeeded, my revenge had to activate automatically. 2 days later, I met Marcus again, this time in a discreet office outside downtown, far from my usual routes. I wore sunglasses and a scarf, paranoid that someone might follow me. He slid a folder across his desk. "This," he said, "is your contingency will." I opened it. My name was printed across the top again, but the contents had changed. Marcus explained carefully, "This version will only be released if the primary document is compromised, or if you're confirmed deceased under suspicious circumstances." "Suspicious," I repeated softly. He nodded. "It includes one new addition, a pre-recorded video message. You'll explain everything in your own words. It'll be impossible to ignore." The idea chilled me at first. The thought of recording my own voice from beyond the grave made my stomach twist. But the more I thought about it, the more power it gave me. They could silence me physically, but not legally, not permanently. Marcus set up the camera in his conference room. My hands trembled as I adjusted my blouse. "When you're ready," he said gently. I took a breath, looked into the lens, and began. "My name is Liana Brooks. If you're watching this, it means I'm either dead or missing under circumstances that are not an accident." I spoke for nearly an hour about Derek, about the brake failure, about the way my family's love had soured into calculation. I named names. I gave details. And I didn't cry once. When I finished, Marcus nodded slowly, his face pale. "That's more than enough," he said quietly. Afterward, we finalized the documents. Everything would go to Talia and several charities supporting women escaping financial abuse. Derek and his children would inherit nothing except, perhaps, the truth of what they'd done. When I returned home that evening, I played my role flawlessly. I smiled. I cooked dinner. I pretended to be grateful to be alive. Derek wrapped his arm around me as if nothing had happened. He said things like, "We're so lucky, baby," and life gave us a second chance. But there was a flicker in his eyes, disappointment. He hadn't expected me to survive. I could feel it. Over the next few days, I noticed him watching me more closely. He'd stand in doorways silently, observing. Once, I caught him scrolling through my phone while I showered. When I confronted him, he laughed it off. "You're being paranoid, Lee. You've been through trauma." Maybe I had, but that didn't mean I was wrong. I decided to start recording everything. I bought small voice recorders online and hid them around the house behind books, under tables, even inside flower pots. I wanted proof, real proof. Meanwhile, Talia and I began collecting financial records. Derek didn't know I still had access to. We found transactions that shouldn't exist, wire transfers to offshore accounts under fake company names. Some even dated back to before the accident. It wasn't just attempted murder anymore. It was fraud. Deep, calculated fraud. Talia came over one night to help me scan the files. "He's not just greedy," she said, shaking her head. "He's criminal." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I think he's dangerous too." "Then stop sleeping in that house," she urged. "I can't," I said. "If I disappear now, he'll know I know." So I stayed, pretending, smiling, waiting. A few nights later, I caught Derek in the garage again. It was past midnight. I watched through a crack in the door as he crouched near my car, flashlight in hand. I held my breath, my heart pounding so loud I thought he'd hear it. After a few minutes, he stood, pocketed something, and walked back inside without noticing me. The next morning, I checked the garage. The brake lines were intact, at least for now. But I noticed something new on the workbench, a small bottle labeled ethylene glycol, antifreeze. It wasn't for the car, I knew that instinctively. Later that day, Derek made me coffee. He brought it to me with that same too smooth smile. "Extra sweet, just how you like it," he said. I looked down at the cup, my reflection rippling in the surface. I smiled back, pretending nothing was wrong. Then I excused myself, walked into the kitchen, and poured it down the sink. Talia called that night, her voice urgent. "You can't keep waiting for them to act, Liana. This is getting dangerous." "I know," I said quietly. "That's why I'm not waiting anymore. I'm documenting everything. And when they try again, because they will, I'll be ready." Over the next week, I installed hidden cameras disguised as decor pieces, synced them to a cloud account, and started keeping an audio diary. Every night before bed, I whispered into my phone every thought, every suspicion, every strange interaction. By the end of that week, I'd built a silent fortress of evidence around myself. Still, there was one moment that nearly broke me. I found an envelope on my desk labeled Life Insurance Policy Beneficiary, Derek Cole. It was new, signed only days before the accident. I hadn't signed it, my signature had been forged. I sat there staring at the paper until my eyes blurred with tears. Every ounce of doubt I had left evaporated. Derek hadn't just been careless or greedy, he had planned everything. But when I saw a life insurance policy filed in my name with Derek as beneficiary, I knew time was running out. It was supposed to be a normal evening, a family dinner, laughter and wine. But I knew better. By the time Derek suggested the dinner, I was already halfway gone, not physically, but emotionally. I was living among strangers, pretending to be family. My house had become a stage, and I was just playing my role, waiting for the next act to unfold. Every word I spoke was measured. Every smile was rehearsed. I didn't trust the air I breathed in that place anymore. It was a Thursday night when Derek came home early from work, wearing that same confident grin that used to make me weak in the knees. "Let's do something nice tonight," he said, slipping off his jacket. "A family dinner. All of us together. It's been too long." I glanced up from my laptop, forcing a soft smile. "That sounds nice." Inside, alarms were going off in my head. Derek never planned family dinners. He hated sitting still. The sudden gesture screamed of performance and danger. Zoe and Caleb got home around 6. They were unusually cheerful, helping set the table, lighting candles, even complimenting me on the dress I'd chosen. It all felt too smooth, too polite, like everyone had memorized their lines. The air buzzed with false warmth. Derek opened a bottle of Merlot, a vintage he knew I loved. He poured me a generous glass, then topped off everyone else's. I noticed something subtle though. He watched me drink, but not the others. His glass stayed nearly full all night. I kept my hand steady as I lifted the wine, pretending to sip. The liquid brushed my lips but didn't touch my tongue. I smiled, letting the warmth of the moment hide the chill in my chest. We talked about nothing and everything. Zoe rambled about her new boyfriend. Caleb mentioned his college applications. Derek kept steering the conversation back to the future. "You've been working too hard, Lee," he said softly. "You need to think about rest, about balance. Maybe let me handle some things for a while, the business side, the properties." There it was again. That careful language, "let me handle things." I laughed lightly. "I'm not ready to retire yet," he smirked, swirling his wine. "You might not get a choice if you keep overworking yourself." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I could feel Zoe's eyes flick toward him, then back to me, as if silently checking whether I caught it. I did. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself, claiming I needed to check on dessert. In the kitchen, I quickly poured my untouched wine into the sink, rinsed the glass, and refilled it halfway with fresh wine straight from the unopened bottle on the counter. My hands were trembling, but I forced them to stay steady. If they were testing me, they'd get a show. Before heading back, I turned on my phone's recorder and slipped it under the tablecloth near my seat. It would pick up everything. When I sat back down, Derek reached over, brushing his hand against mine. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "To family," I echoed, meeting his gaze. His eyes held no warmth, only calculation. Dinner dragged on. Every moment felt like walking a tightrope above an open flame. I could see Derek studying me, waiting. Zoe kept forcing smiles, while Caleb barely said a word. I felt the tension in my throat, thick and metallic. Talia called midway through dessert, a perfectly timed lifeline. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, her voice too casual to be casual. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a light laugh. "Just dinner with the family. Just checking," she replied, but I could hear the edge in her tone. "You sound tense." I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. After dinner, Derek insisted I have one more drink. "Come on," he said, smiling that rehearsed smile. "A toast to survival. You've been through so much." My pulse quickened. "Maybe later," I said, pretending to yawn. "I'm exhausted." He didn't push, not right away. "Of course, baby," he murmured, leaning over to kiss my cheek. I could smell the faint scent of alcohol and something chemical on his breath. My stomach turned. I took my glass upstairs with me, pretending I was going to finish it while reading. Once in the bedroom, I set it down on the dresser and stared at it for a long time. The liquid glimmered red under the lamp. Something inside me whispered, "Don't touch it." Instead, I grabbed a small cotton swab from my vanity and dipped it into the wine, sealing it in a plastic bag I labeled quietly with a pen, "Dinner sample." Then I hid it in my closet safe. Downstairs, I could hear laughter. But it wasn't the warm kind, it was brittle, sharp, the kind that hides secrets. Later that night, I woke to faint murmurs drifting up through the vent. I crept down the hallway and stopped outside Derek's office. The door was slightly ajar. "It's done," Derek was saying, his voice low but firm. Zoe's whisper followed. "Are you sure she drank it?" "She will," he said coldly. "She always does." My entire body froze. The words hit me like a slap. "She will." I backed away silently, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my own breathing. I wanted to scream, to run, but I knew better. I had to be smart. In my room, I locked the door, grabbed my phone, and emailed Marcus and Talia everything, the recording, my suspicions, and the photo of the brake line. I typed one final line before hitting send. "If anything happens to me, don't believe the story they tell." I packed a small bag, just in case, and left it hidden behind the dresser. Then I lay down, forcing myself to appear calm, my phone clutched tight in my hand. When dawn crept in through the window, I was still awake. My throat burned, my head pounded, not from poison but from fear. I looked at the untouched glass of wine still sitting on the dresser. For a moment, I considered throwing it away. Instead, I left it there, as silent evidence. When I woke up the next morning feeling dizzy, I realized I shouldn't have trusted even my own drink. They thought I was dead, and for a moment, so did I. The morning after that dinner felt wrong from the moment I opened my eyes. The light streaming through the curtains was too bright. My head was too heavy, and my tongue felt thick and dry like I'd swallowed cotton. I tried to sit up, but my body moved like it belonged to someone else. Every breath scraped against my chest. I stared at the glass of wine still sitting on the dresser, half full, and a terrible thought struck me. I hadn't drunk it, but what if something else had been tampered with? The tea I'd had before bed? The pills I'd taken for pain? My mind was foggy, my memories slipping like water through my fingers. I staggered toward the bathroom, gripping the doorframe for balance. My reflection looked back at me pale, gray. Around the lips, eyes dull and glassy. I remember whispering to myself, "Stay awake, stay awake." But the next thing I remember was darkness swallowing me whole. When I woke again, everything was quiet, too quiet. My head throbbed, and I could hear a faint beeping somewhere nearby. The air smelled like antiseptic and metal. I turned my head, vision swimming, and saw white walls, a curtain, a monitor, a hospital. A voice beside me said softly, "Welcome back, Liana." It was Marcus. He looked tired, his usually neat suit wrinkled, his eyes shadowed. For a second, I couldn't understand why he was there. Then I remembered the dinner, the dizziness, the whisper through the vent. "She will. Where am I?" My voice came out cracked, barely audible. "You're safe," Marcus said. "Talia found you just in time." "Talia." My mind snapped into focus. "She found me?" He nodded. "You texted her in the middle of the night just your location pin. No message. She got worried, drove straight to your house. You were unconscious at the foot of the stairs." I blinked, trying to recall. The last thing I remembered was dizziness, the room spinning, the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then nothing. "What happened?" I asked. "The doctor said it was a strong sedative mixed with alcohol," Marcus replied quietly. "Enough to put most people in a coma. You were lucky." Lucky. That word didn't feel right. Luck had nothing to do with this. "Do they know?" I whispered. "Derek, Zoe, Caleb?" Marcus hesitated, then said, "No. And that's exactly how it should stay for now." Before I could ask what he meant, he continued, his tone firm, but calm. "We're going to let them think you're dead." The words hit me harder than the crash, harder than any betrayal I'd faced. "What?" I breathed. He leaned forward. "Think about it, Liana. They've already tried to kill you. Twice. If they believe they succeeded, they'll stop watching. They'll start making mistakes." I stared at him, my pulse racing. "You want me to disappear?" "For now," he said. "It's the only way to stay alive and expose them." It took me a long time to answer. My mind screamed that it was insane. But my heart, my bruised, exhausted heart, knew he was right. Within hours, everything was set in motion. The hospital listed me under a false name. The few people who knew Marcus, Talia, and one trusted doctor swore to secrecy. My chart was sealed. My body was transferred for private arrangements. To the world, Liana Brooks was dead. From the shadows of that hospital room, I watched my own life being dismantled. Talia handled the logistics with Marcus's guidance, while Derek, according to her updates, wasted no time arranging my funeral. He claimed it was what I would have wanted. I stayed hidden in a safe house Marcus owned on the outskirts of the city, a small cottage with white curtains and a view of the sea. It should have felt peaceful, but peace doesn't come easily when you've seen the inside of your own grave. Talia visited every day, bringing updates and groceries, trying to keep me sane. "It's working," she said one afternoon, setting her phone on the counter. "They're not even pretending to grieve. Derek's already talking about selling the beach house." My stomach tightened. "How long has it been?" 5 days. 5 days. That's all it took for the man who swore he loved me to move on to my money. Marcus came by with more news later that evening. "The reading of your will is scheduled," he said, "just like you planned. Except now, it'll happen while they're searching for it at your house." I blinked. "You mean?" He smiled faintly. "Yes, the one they don't know about. It'll be read to Talia at a private location. The timing will be poetic." I almost laughed. Poetic revenge. It wasn't something I ever imagined taking part in. But as the days passed, I started to feel stronger, angrier. I spent hours walking along the shoreline near the cottage, thinking about the years I'd wasted trying to build love out of manipulation. I thought about the family dinners, the forced laughter, the subtle poison that had crept into every corner of my life until it literally became poison. Then the day of the funeral came. Talia brought me her phone, showing me the live stream Derek had set up for distant friends. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the people who had tried to kill me stand over my coffin. Zoe wore designer black, tears perfectly timed. Caleb looked bored, texting between hymns. Derek gave a speech so heartfelt, so rehearsed, that even I almost believed it. He spoke about me as if I were a saint. Liana was the heart of our family, he said, voice trembling just enough for the cameras. She gave us everything. We'll honor her legacy by taking care of what she left behind. I couldn't stop smiling, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood how evil could wear a kind face. Talia squeezed my shoulder gently. You okay? I nodded slowly. Yeah, better than ever. As Derek and the kids bowed their heads in faux grief, Marcus received confirmation that the secret will, my real will, was being read at that very same moment in a quiet office across town. And while they stood there crying over a woman they thought they'd buried, my voice was already rising from beyond the grave, ready to destroy them. When I saw the funeral live stream, watching Derek cry crocodile tears, I swore revenge. It was surreal, watching people mourn me while planning their next luxury purchase. The day of my funeral felt like a strange dream I couldn't wake from. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was alive, breathing, and watching people pretend to grieve the woman they'd tried to kill. From the safety of Marcus's seaside cottage, I sat cross-legged on the couch with Talia beside me, both of us watching the live stream on her tablet. The video opened with soft piano music and rows of people dressed in black, their faces solemn and rehearsed. I almost laughed when I saw Derek front and center, his arm around Zoe, his hand gently squeezing her shoulder for comfort. His performance was flawless, the doting husband, the broken widower. Zoe clutched a tissue dramatically, dabbing her eyes even when no tears were falling. Caleb stood stiffly behind them, his face expressionless, his eyes occasionally wandering toward the cameras as if checking how he looked. Unbelievable, Talia muttered. They're putting on a show. I gave a hollow smile. That's all they ever knew how to do. As the service began, the pastor spoke about my kindness, my generosity, my devotion to family. Each word felt like an insult. I wanted to scream through the screen to shout that none of them knew me, that their grief was counterfeit, their words poison wrapped in velvet. But instead, I sat quietly, memorizing every detail, every lie. When Derek rose to speak, the room hushed. He walked up to the podium slowly, the weight of his fabricated sadness visible in the slump of his shoulders. He cleared his throat and began. Liana was the love of my life. She was my partner, my anchor. Losing her has shattered me in ways I can't describe. I felt Talia tense beside me. Anchor? She whispered. You nearly drowned her. I couldn't take my eyes off him. His voice trembled just enough to seem real. He even paused halfway through to wipe fake tears. But the words that followed made my blood run cold. She always told me, he continued, that if anything ever happened to her, she trusted me to take care of everything: her home, her business, her family. And I intend to do just that, to honor her memory. My jaw tightened. Take care of everything. Of course, that was his way of justifying what he was about to do next, seize control of everything I'd built. The camera panned to Zoe and Caleb, both nodding solemnly like dutiful children. But I saw the flicker of greed in Zoe's eyes when Derek mentioned assets and legacy. It was all a performance. Talia leaned closer to the screen and whispered, "They have no idea, do they?" "Not yet," I said. "But they will." Because at that very moment, while Derek lied through his teeth and the mourners dabbed at dry eyes, Marcus was sitting across town in his office, reading my real will, the secret one. The one Derek didn't even know existed. I imagined the scene vividly because Marcus had promised to record it for me. Talia and I would watch it later, but for now I took comfort in knowing it was happening. My words, my truth were being spoken aloud. The irony was perfect. While they searched for my will at my house, it was being read elsewhere to the only person who deserved to hear it. Halfway through the funeral, Derek's lawyer, an oily man named Vincent Crane, leaned in to whisper something to him. Derek's expression faltered for a second, just long enough for me to see the crack in his mask. Talia noticed it too. "What's that about?" "Marcus just sent the notification," I said softly. "He's received confirmation from the clerk's office that the will reading has started." Right on cue, Derek shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. I could almost hear his thoughts. What will reading? Where? After the service, the mourners trickled out, offering Derek empty condolences. He shook hands, hugged people, accepted their sympathy like the grieving hero he wanted the world to see. Then, as the last of the guests left, he turned to Vincent. I could read his lips even through the grainy live stream. Find it. I don't care. How? Find the damn will. I almost clapped. And there it is, I murmured. The mask is off. Within an hour, I saw the security footage from my home cameras I'd secretly set to stream to my cloud account before everything happened. Derek, Zoe, and Caleb stormed into the house still dressed in black. They tore through drawers, flipped furniture, rifled through files. Caleb even kicked a cabinet door in frustration. Zoe screamed, "Where is it? She wouldn't leave us nothing!" Derek barked. "She couldn't have given it to anyone else. It has to be here." Watching them tear apart my home was oddly satisfying. They didn't know every camera was recording, every move preserved as evidence. They didn't know I was watching from miles away, sipping tea, alive and free. Talia glanced at me, half horrified, half amused. "You planned all this." I nodded. Every detail. The timing, the traps, the recordings, all of it. As they dug deeper, their desperation grew. Derek opened my office safe, only to find it empty except for a single flash drive labeled Memories. He plugged it into my laptop expecting bank documents or deeds. Instead, a video began to play, one I'd left just for him. My own face filled the screen. "Hello, Derek," I said in the recording, smiling faintly. "If you're watching this, it means you've lost everything." Talia and I laughed so hard tears filled our eyes. "He's going to lose his mind," she gasped between giggles. "That's the idea," I said. In the footage, Derek's expression turned to stone. Zoe shouted, "Turn it off!" Caleb slammed the laptop shut, but it was too late. Every second was already backed up online. When the video ended, Derek threw the laptop against the wall, shattering it. He stormed out of the room, his voice shaking with rage. "She can't be dead," he growled. "Not like this. She's mocking us." He wasn't wrong, watching him. Unravel was the sweetest justice I'd ever tasted. For the first time in months, I felt powerful again, not because I had money, but because I had truth, evidence, patience. As they tore the house apart, they didn't realize every second was being recorded for court. While they searched for my fortune, my true will was already being read to the only person who earned it. As Derek tore apart my office, screaming at his children to find something, my voice was already echoing through another room miles away. In Marcus's downtown office, the blinds were drawn, the lights soft, and the atmosphere heavy with silence. Across from him sat Talia, her eyes red but not from grief, from disbelief. Marcus clicked play on the video, and there I was on screen, alive in a way that no memory could capture, calm, collected, and heartbreakingly clear. I wasn't the version of Liana they thought they'd buried. I was the one who saw through them long before the dirt hit the coffin. "Thank you for being here," I said in the video, my tone steady but warm. "If you're watching this, it means that my suspicions were right, and that my so-called family finally got what they wanted." Talia told me later that she held her breath from the first second to the last. She said the room felt electric, like every word I spoke carried the weight of justice waiting too long to be served. Marcus had followed my instructions precisely. Only Talia, my attorney, and a court representative were present. The document bearing my signature was unsealed, and my final message began. In the video, I smiled faintly, though there was a sadness behind it. For years, I tried to believe that love could fix greed, that loyalty could cure entitlement. But when I nearly died in a crash that wasn't an accident, I stopped believing in miracles. Each one, Derek Cole husband, Zoe Cole stepdaughter, Caleb Cole stepson, they thought they could erase me, I said in the recording. But all they did was prove that I was right to protect myself. Marcus paused the video briefly to confirm the legal points aloud. The new will revoked every prior document. Every account, every property, every investment transferred to Talia and 3 charities that I had quietly supported for years. A women's shelter, a scholarship fund for single mothers, and an organization for survivors of financial abuse. The Cole family was left with nothing, not a dollar, not a possession, not even the right to claim my name. Then the video continued. I leaned forward, my recorded eyes locking onto the camera like I was staring directly at them. "To Derek," I said slowly, I leave the one thing he's earned the truth. I've documented every lie, every forgery, every attempt to hurt me. It's all with my lawyer and in the hands of the police by the time you hear this. You buried me too soon. Talia told me her hands were shaking by then. She had tears streaming down her face. But she also said she smiled because she'd never seen me so fearless. I want my story to mean something, I continued. If I can't live to see justice, this will make sure those who tried to destroy me destroy only themselves. Then came the final line I'd written months earlier, never realizing how perfectly it would fit. You can fake tears at a funeral, but you can't fake what happens after. The video ended, the screen fading to black. The only sound left was the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Marcus looked at Talia, and she said the same thing she'd later tell me. It didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a warning. While they sat there absorbing my message, the rest of the city began to stir. Marcus had timed it perfectly. Within an hour, copies of the video, the notarized will, and Derek's forged insurance papers were sent automatically to multiple recipients, including the police, the district attorney, and 3 major news outlets. The story broke by evening. Headlines filled social media like wildfire. Wealthy designer's secret will exposes murder plot by family. Liana Brooks' will reveals hidden betrayal. Talia's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Marcus advised her to stay calm, to keep quiet until the investigation officially reopened. But she couldn't help herself. She called me that night, voice trembling with emotion. Lee, it worked. Everything worked. They know. Hearing that, I almost couldn't breathe. I walked to the window of the safe house, staring out at the sea, and let the sound of the waves fill the silence. How are they reacting? I asked quietly. Talia laughed softly, a little bitter, a little triumphant. Derek's losing his mind. They found out during dinner. He threw a chair at the wall when the news aired. Zoe's crying on the floor. Caleb's blaming everyone but himself. I closed my eyes. I could picture it, the chaos, the disbelief, the shock of realizing that the woman they thought they'd buried had outsmarted them all. Good, I whispered. Let them feel a fraction of what they put me through. Later that night, Marcus stopped by the safe house. He was tired but smiling, holding a sealed envelope. They've already started the formal inquiry, he said. You'll be cleared of any suspicion once the police finish verifying the evidence. They've issued a warrant for Derek's financial records. My stomach fluttered with something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. So this is it, I said. It's finally happening, he nodded. You're free now, Liana. For the first time, you're truly free. But freedom, I realized, came with its own kind of ache. The people I had once loved were being exposed as monsters, and I was the ghost pulling their strings from the shadows. That night, I sat by the fire in the cottage, the news replaying in the background. Reporters outside Derek's home shouted questions while cameras flashed. He pushed through them, shouting something about lies and fabrication. But his face told the truth, the panic, the fear, the unraveling of a man who'd lost control. The camera caught Zoe behind him shouting, "She can't be dead, she can't." And she was right, I wasn't. I turned off the TV, leaned back, and closed my eyes. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like justice. The next day, the news headline read, "Wealthy designer's secret will exposes family plot." Their world began to crumble and I was alive to watch it happen. The morning after the story broke, I woke to chaos. My phone, the one only Marcus and Talia knew about, was buzzing non-stop with updates. News outlets had run the footage from my video statement, snippets of my calm, unwavering voice telling the world that my husband and his children had plotted to end my life. The internet was aflame. Every headline screamed betrayal, greed, and deceit. Derek's face was everywhere. The once respected entrepreneur, now the prime suspect in what reporters were calling the inheritance murder case. I sat on the couch in my safe house, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the television. Every channel had my name on it, my photo, my home, my story. It felt surreal, like watching a movie about someone else's life, except I knew every line of the script because I'd written it. Talia arrived an hour later, wearing sunglasses and carrying a box of pastries like it was a peace offering. "You look like you haven't slept," she said, dropping onto the couch beside me. "I haven't," I admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see Derek's face. That fake sorrow. She handed me a coffee. "Well, You can stop picturing it. The world's seeing the real one now. On the TV, a news anchor's voice played over footage of Derek leaving his house surrounded by reporters. Sources close to the investigation confirm that law enforcement has reopened the case of interior designer Liana Brooks following new evidence from her posthumous will video. He looked furious. His hair was disheveled, his jaw tight, his expression less grieving widower and more cornered predator. The reporters bombarded him with questions. "Mr. Cole, how do you respond to the claims your wife made? Did you try to kill her for the inheritance? Were you aware of the forged insurance documents in your name?" He snapped. "This is all lies. My wife was unstable, she fabricated everything before her death." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Unstable. That's the word men like him always use." Talia smirked. "He's panicking. That's good. Keep watching." Later that afternoon, the first police raid happened. The footage showed detectives carrying boxes of documents out of Derek's office. Computers, hard drives, files. The investigation was public, now irreversible. Caleb tried to distance himself immediately, according to the news. He issued a statement through an attorney claiming he had no knowledge of any wrongdoing and that his stepmother's allegations were as shocking to him as anyone. Zoe, on the other hand, went quiet. No statements, no appearances, no social media. "She's scared," I said. "She should be." Marcus visited that evening with updates from the detectives. He'd met with them earlier that day. "They've found the offshore accounts," he said. "Exactly where you said they'd be. The fake consulting firms. The shell companies all tied back to Derek. You did well, Liana." I nodded, my hands trembling slightly. "So, they're going to arrest him?" "It's just a matter of time," Marcus replied. "Once the bank confirms the transactions, they'll have enough for a warrant." For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of calm. Justice wasn't a fantasy anymore, it was moving, alive, in motion. But peace didn't last long. That night, while scrolling through social media under a private account, I found something that stopped me cold. A short clip of Derek on a talk show filmed that very day. He was sitting in front of the cameras, looking solemn, eyes red. "I loved my wife," he said softly. "I'm still grieving. This so-called evidence is a misunderstanding. I'm cooperating fully with authorities. But if she wanted to ruin us, she's done a good job even from the grave." He paused dramatically, then added, "I hope wherever she is, she finds peace." I nearly threw the tablet across the room. "He's twisting it," I hissed. "He's turning himself into the victim." Talia sighed. "That's what narcissists do. They can't handle losing control." Marcus, who had stayed the night to monitor updates, looked up from his laptop. "Let him talk. The more he speaks, the more evidence he leaves behind." He was right, and within 48 hours, the first warrant was executed. Derek's accounts were frozen, his assets seized, his business partners began backing away one by one. But even as his empire collapsed, Derek clung to one belief, that I had somehow faked everything, that I wasn't really gone. Talia showed me a private investigator's report that confirmed it. Derek had hired someone to confirm his wife's death. "He's paranoid," Marcus said when I showed him. "He's guilty," I replied. "He can feel me breathing down his neck." And he wasn't wrong, because I was there, breathing, watching, waiting. 2 days later, Zoe finally broke her silence. She gave an interview from what looked like a hotel room. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks as she sobbed for the camera. "I loved her," she cried. "I don't know why she'd say those things. My dad would never hurt anyone." I could see the lie in every tear. But what caught my attention most wasn't what she said it was, what she accidentally revealed. On the nightstand behind her, barely visible, was a document folder with the logo of one of Derek's fake companies. The image went viral within hours, and the comments exploded. "She's lying. They're covering something up. Justice for Liana." The public turned fast. The story wasn't about a mysterious death anymore, it was about survival and revenge. Derek's panic grew. He tried to sell his cars, his watch collection, even his late father's estate, but the bank had already seized it all. The more desperate he became, the more reckless he acted. And then, one night, Marcus called me at midnight, his voice calm but electric with triumph. "They have him," he said simply. "Derek's been arrested. Fraud, forgery, attempted murder, the works." I sat there frozen, the words sinking in slowly. "He's in custody?" Yes, Zoe and Caleb are being questioned separately. Talia burst into tears. I just sat there, staring out the window at the moonlight shimmering across the waves. For months, I'd lived in fear, waiting, hiding, planning. And now the man who had tried to end my life was behind bars. For the first time, I allowed myself to breathe freely. But peace is a fragile thing, and deep down I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. When the investigators showed up at my supposed grave, I knew the game was only half over. If they wanted to play games, I'd end it with a confession they could never forget. Derek's arrest should have been the end. It should have felt final, like the closing of a door I'd been trapped behind for too long. But it didn't. Even with him in custody, something inside me refused to rest. Maybe it was the paranoia, or maybe it was instinct. Because every time I turned on the news and saw his face, that practiced expression of sorrow, that performative guilt, I knew it wasn't over. A week after his arrest, Marcus came by the safe house with updates. The police had found enough evidence to indict Derek on multiple counts of fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. Zoe and Caleb were cooperating under pressure, trying to save themselves. They're claiming they didn't know about the attempts on your life, Marcus said. They're pinning it all on Derek, I scoffed. Of course they are. They were his accomplices until the cameras turned on. He hesitated before continuing. There's something else. Derek's refusing to plead. He's telling everyone you set him up. I looked at Marcus. Stunned. He still thinks I'm alive? Marcus gave a grim smile. Oh, he's certain of it, he told the detective. And, I quote, "You can't kill a woman who doesn't exist." That sentence haunted me. The certainty in his madness. He wasn't scared, he was obsessed. That night, I sat at the window, watching the waves crash under a bruised sky. I thought about how easily lies could twist into truth if no one challenged them. Derek was still trying to control the story, even from a jail cell. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just hide and hope justice would speak for me. I had to end it myself publicly, unmistakably. The next morning, I called Marcus and said, "We're going to leak it." He paused. "Leak what?" "The hospital record," I said. "The proof that I survived." He hesitated, and I could practically hear his mind racing on the other end of the line. "Liana, you understand what that means, right? Once this goes public, you can't undo it. You'll have to come forward. No more hiding." "I'm done hiding," I said quietly. "It's time he faces me alive." Marcus didn't argue. Within hours, he sent a carefully redacted hospital report to a journalist he trusted, one who'd been following my case from the start. The next morning, the world woke to a new headline that sent shockwaves through the media. Breaking. Liana Brooks may be alive. New medical records suggest possible survival. The internet exploded. Speculation flooded every social feed. Conspiracy theories blossomed like weeds. Some said I had faked my death. Others claimed I was in witness protection. Theories turned into headlines. And within a day, Derek's name was trending again. This time, alongside mine. The news reached him faster than I expected. During his next hearing, he erupted in front of cameras, shouting that I was manipulating the world and that the system was being used against him. The footage played on every channel. I watched from the safety of my cottage, my heart pounding. Talia called within minutes, laughing through her tears. "Lee, you should have seen his face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost." I smiled faintly. He kind of did. Meanwhile, the investigation dug deeper. The private investigator Derek had hired before his arrest reappeared, and this time, he wasn't working for Derek anymore. He came forward to the police with what he'd found. Hidden camera footage from my garage the night before the crash. It showed Derek leaning under the hood of my car for several minutes, glancing over his shoulder twice before leaving. That was the proof the police needed. The footage, the forged insurance papers, the poison test results from my wine, all of it painted a perfect picture. And then came the twist I didn't expect. One afternoon, Marcus called me. His tone was calm, but I could hear the weight in it. "Zoe just confessed," he said. "Confessed?" My heart skipped. "She admitted she knew about the brake tampering," he said. "She told the detectives she deleted evidence at Derek's request. He promised her money from your life insurance if she kept quiet." I sat in silence for a long time. I'd imagined many outcomes, but not that. Not Zoe breaking first. "She's pleading for a deal," Marcus added. "It might reduce her sentence, but it seals Derek's fate. They're preparing the case for trial now. It should have made me happy. It should have felt like victory. But instead, all I felt was exhaustion, a hollow, quiet ache. Because no matter what happened next, I'd already lost too much. My peace, my trust, my name. Still, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just let the courts tell my story. I needed to face Derek myself, not as a ghost, not as a victim, but as the woman who survived him. Marcus tried to talk me out of it. "You've already won," he said. "Let the system finish it." But I shook my head. "No, Marcus. I need him to see me. I need him to know he didn't bury me, he created me." He sighed, knowing he couldn't stop me. "Then we'll do it carefully. The trial's in 2 weeks. That's your moment." For the next 14 days, I prepared myself. Not for revenge, that part was already done. For closure. For the truth. I stayed off the internet, away from the noise, focusing only on breathing, on grounding myself in the present. Every night I'd stand by the window and whisper the same thing. He doesn't own my story anymore. And when the day of the trial finally came, I dressed in black, my hair tied back, my expression calm. Marcus drove me there himself. As we pulled up to the courthouse, the cameras were already waiting. Marcus looked at me, his eyes soft. "Are you ready?" I took a deep breath, the kind that feels like the end of one life and the beginning of another. "Yes," I said. "Let's finish this. But before I do, I need to face them one last time in court." They stared at me like they were seeing a ghost because, in their eyes, they were. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and nerves. Every sound, footsteps, whispers, the rustle of papers seemed magnified in that sterile air. As Marcus and I walked through the double doors, the world around me slowed to a crawl. Reporters were everywhere, their voices blending into a hum of questions I didn't bother answering. I kept my eyes straight ahead. My palms were damp, but my heartbeat was steady. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times, the confrontation, the shock, the silence that would follow. But no rehearsal could have prepared me for the real thing. When I stepped into the courtroom, all heads turned. The first to see me was Zoe. Her jaw dropped, her hand flying to her mouth as if to stifle a scream. Caleb froze beside her, his eyes wide and color draining from his face. But it was Derek's reaction I'll never forget. He stood up slowly, disbelief etched across his features. For a second, he looked human, frightened, almost fragile. Then the mask fell away. His face twisted into fury. "You," he hissed. "You're supposed to be dead." The room fell silent. Even the judge looked startled. I stood still, unblinking. "Surprise," I said softly. Marcus leaned toward the bailiff. "My client is here to testify." A murmur rippled through the gallery as I took the stand. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. For months, they'd taken my voice, my name, my life, but not today. Today, I was the storm they never saw coming. Derek refused to sit down at first. He kept glaring at me, as if he could kill me with his eyes. His lawyer tugged at his sleeve, whispering harshly, but Derek barely heard him. He was lost in his own rage. When the prosecutor began questioning me, I spoke clearly, my voice steady even when my hands trembled beneath the table. "My name is Liana Brooks," I began, "and I am not dead. But if Derek Cole had his way, I would be." The courtroom gasped, the words slicing through the air like a blade. I told them everything: how the brake lines had been cut, how the wine was poisoned, how I'd found forged insurance papers naming Derek as my beneficiary. I detailed every act of manipulation, every lie, every attempt to make me feel paranoid until paranoia became survival. The prosecutor played the recordings from my home, the arguments, the whispers between Derek and Zoe, the conversation I'd caught through the vent. "Are you sure she drank it?" And finally, he played the video I'd left, the message from my will. The same one the world had seen, but now with Derek forced to watch it from the defendant's chair. He sat motionless, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the screen. I could almost hear his thoughts spinning, the disbelief that his control had crumbled so completely. When the video ended, the prosecutor turned to me. "Mrs. Brooks, do you believe your husband intended to kill you for your assets?" I met Derek's eyes. "I don't believe it," I said. "I know it." Derek slammed his hands on the table, shouting, "You're lying! You set me up! You—" The judge's gavel cracked through the air. "Mr. Cole, one more outburst and you'll be removed from this courtroom." He fell silent, breathing hard, veins standing out on his neck. Zoe began to sob quietly beside him, muttering that she was sorry, that she didn't mean for it to go this far. Caleb just stared at the floor, his shoulders hunched in defeat. When the defense had their turn, Derek's lawyer tried everything. He painted me as vindictive, unstable, a manipulative woman scorned. He suggested I'd orchestrated an elaborate scheme to frame an innocent man. I didn't flinch. I let him finish his monologue before speaking again. I didn't fake my death, I said calmly. I survived his attempt at it. The room went silent again. Marcus stood, submitting the last piece of evidence, the toxicology report from the wine I'd saved that night. The same wine Derek had poured. The same one I hadn't touched. It tested positive for traces of ethylene glycol. The color drained from Derek's face. He didn't even try to deny it this time. When the judge called for recess, I stood slowly and turned toward him. He looked up at me, eyes wild, broken. You ruined me, he spat under his breath. No, I said softly. You did that yourself. Back in the gallery, people whispered. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled across notepads. Talia sat behind me, tears in her eyes. She mouthed, "You did it." And in that moment, I finally believed it too. When court resumed, the prosecutor delivered a closing argument that made the room vibrate. He spoke of betrayal, greed, and justice, of how love could be weaponized by those who never knew its meaning. He ended with words I'll never forget. The victim in this case may have been declared dead once, but today, she stands before you alive, proof that truth cannot be buried. The jury deliberated for hours, though it felt like days. I sat outside with Marcus and Talia, barely speaking, staring at the marble floor until the bailiff returned. The jury's reached a verdict, he said. We filed back in. Derek didn't look at me this time. Zoe sobbed openly, clutching a tissue. Caleb sat stiff, emotionless. The foreman stood, reading from the paper in his hands. We, the jury, find the defendant, Derek Cole, guilty, on all counts. The words hit like thunder. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just exhaled a breath I'd been holding since the day my brakes failed. Derek slumped in his seat, his body deflating like a balloon punctured at the heart. Zoe wailed. Caleb whispered something I couldn't hear. The judge's voice broke through the noise. The defendant is remanded to custody pending sentencing. As the officers led him away, Derek turned once more to look at me. There was no rage this time. No fury, only recognition. He finally understood that I'd beaten him, not with vengeance, but with truth. As the verdict was read, I finally exhaled, but justice doesn't erase pain. For the first time in years, I felt truly free and completely alone. The sound of the gavel still echoed in my mind long after I left the courthouse. Guilty on all counts. Those words should have felt like the ending, the curtain call after a brutal play. But walking out into the sunlight that afternoon, I realized endings are never that clean. Justice had been served. But healing? Healing was something I'd have to build from the ground up. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust toward my face. I said nothing. I wasn't ready to share my story with the world, not yet. Marcus guided me to the car like a bodyguard, one hand on my shoulder, his expression unreadable. You did it, he said quietly once we were inside. I shook my head. No, I survived it. That's all. When we reached the safe house, Talia was waiting. The moment I stepped through the door, she pulled me into a hug that broke the silence I'd been holding inside for weeks. It's over, she whispered. Almost, I said. There's still sentencing. She leaned back, smiling faintly. For him, maybe. For you, it's just beginning. She was right. Over the next few weeks, I tried to relearn what living felt like. For so long, my life had been defined by fear, every noise in the dark, every glance over my shoulder. Now, those fears had nowhere to go. They just floated in the empty spaces he used to occupy. I started small, mornings at the beach, fresh air through open windows, cooking meals just for myself. It felt strange at first, quiet, peaceful, foreign. I kept waiting for someone to call my name, to ask me for something, to question where I was going. But no one did. My business, which I'd assumed would crumble during chaos, had survived thanks to Talia. She'd kept it afloat, discreetly managing projects under a temporary name while the investigation unfolded. When she suggested relaunching under a new brand, I hesitated. Are you sure you're ready? she asked one morning as we reviewed designs at the kitchen table. I don't think I'll ever be ready, I admitted. But maybe that's the point. I don't want to wait for the perfect moment anymore. I want to live now imperfectly, unapologetically. So we did it. We rebranded. Liana Brooks Designs became Eden Interiors, a symbol of rebirth, of something beautiful growing from something broken. The first client after my death was a young widow who said she wanted her home to feel alive again. When I handed her the final design, she hugged me and said, "You gave me back a piece of myself." I smiled. But inside, I knew the truth. She'd just given me back a piece of me. Public attention didn't fade easily, though. Documentaries reached out. Talk shows offered me money to appear. Book agents called with contracts promising millions. I declined them all. I wasn't interested in turning my pain into a product. I didn't want my face plastered on screens beside Derek's name. I didn't want to be the woman who rose from the dead. I wanted to be Liana. Just Liana, alive and quiet and finally free. Instead, I focused on something that mattered: the foundation. With Marcus's help, I used the money from my properties and settlements to create the Phoenix Fund, a nonprofit for women escaping manipulative and abusive relationships. We partnered with legal teams, shelters, and therapists. Every woman we helped felt like another silent victory, proof that I hadn't endured everything for nothing. But even freedom has its ghosts. Some nights, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding as if I were still trapped in that house. The smell of antifreeze, the sound of Derek's voice whispering through the vent, it all came back in flashes. Talia would tell me to give it time. But time is a tricky thing. It doesn't heal. It just gives you space to live around the scars. One evening, about 3 months after the verdict, I drove back to the old house, my house. It stood empty now, the windows boarded up, the garden wild and unkempt. The air smelled like dust and sea salt. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Silence greeted me like an old friend. The walls still held echoes of a life I'd once believed in: laughter, dinners, deceit. I walked through each room slowly, running my hand along the furniture I used to love. In my office, I found a photo frame face down on the floor. I picked it up. It was our wedding picture. We were smiling, that perfect, practiced smile of people who didn't know how fragile everything really was. I stared at it for a long time before finally setting it on the desk. Then I lit a match. The flames flickered, catching the edge of the photo before swallowing it whole. I watched the image curl and blacken, until only ash remained. The smell of smoke filled the air, but for once, it didn't scare me. It felt cleansing. That night, I drove to the beach and sat by the water, letting the waves crash against my ankles. The sky stretched endlessly above me, pink and gold fading into twilight. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. When I got home later, a small envelope was waiting at the door. No return address. My name written in familiar handwriting, sharp, controlled, unmistakable. Derek's. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at it for what felt like forever, my pulse pounding in my ears. He was in prison. How had this gotten here? Talia's voice echoed in my head. Some people never stop trying to control the story. I took the envelope to the kitchen, laid it flat on the counter, and stared at it under the light. My fingers hovered over the flap. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what was inside, but part of me needed to. So I opened it. Just as I began to move on, a letter arrived with no return address and my name written in Derek's handwriting. His words were venom written in ink, dripping with hatred and regret. The letter sat on my kitchen counter for nearly an hour before I touched it again. I stared at it the way you stare at something poisonous, curious, terrified, and unable to look away. The handwriting was unmistakable, precise, deliberate, almost too neat. Derek had always written like a man obsessed with control. Finally, I slid my finger beneath the flap and tore it open. The paper smelled faintly of disinfectant and something metallic, maybe the faint trace of prison ink. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Liana, you probably think you've won. You haven't. The first sentence alone made my stomach twist. I read on, my eyes scanning every line, each word colder than the last. I don't know how you did it, how you survived, how you fooled everyone. But you should know that I never stopped loving you. You made me the man I am today. Everything I did was for us. I laughed out loud, a bitter, humorless sound that echoed in the empty kitchen. For us? I muttered. You tried to kill me, Derek. I read the rest in silence. You left me no choice. You were pulling away. You were hiding things from me. I just wanted to protect what was ours, the life we built. If you had trusted me, none of this would have happened. It was classic Derek twisting reality until he became the victim, the misunderstood hero of his own tragedy. They've sentenced me like I'm some kind of monster, but I know the truth. I know you still think about me. You always will. You owe me that much. My eyes burned, not from sadness but from rage. He still believed he owned a piece of me, even behind bars. I forgive you for what you've done. I hope one day you'll forgive me too. Until then, remember this. You'll never be free from me. Not really. The letter ended with his full signature, perfectly centered on the page. I folded it slowly, forcing my hands to stay steady, then slipped it back into the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there in silence, the words seeping into me like poison. A knock at the door broke the spell. Talia stepped in, balancing 2 cups of coffee, her expression light until she saw my face. What's wrong? I held up the envelope. He wrote to me. She froze. From prison? I nodded, handing it to her. He says he forgives me. Talia set down the coffee, snatched the letter, and read it quickly. Her eyes narrowed, then hardened. This man belongs in a psychological study, not a cell. He's still trying to manipulate you. I know, I said quietly. But reading it, it's like hearing his voice again. It's like he's here. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Then we burn it. Right now. For a moment, I wanted to. But something stopped me. No, I said finally. Not yet. It's evidence. If he ever tries to contact me again, I'll need this. She frowned. You think he'll try again? I know he will, I said softly. People like Derek don't stop. They can't. They feed on control. Later that night, when the house was quiet again, I sat at my desk and wrote a reply, one I never intended to send. Derek, you're right about one thing. I do think about you. But not in the way you imagine. I think about how easily love turned to ownership in your hands. I think about how every promise you made came with a chain attached. You taught me what love isn't. And for that, I'll be forever grateful. I folded the letter neatly, sealed it, and placed it in my desk drawer beside the original. A reminder not of him, but of how far I'd come. A few days later, Marcus called. We need to talk, he said. His tone was cautious. What's wrong? He hesitated. Derek's lawyer filed a petition for appeal. They're arguing his mental state at the time of the crimes. My stomach dropped. You're kidding. I wish I were, he said. It won't change much, the evidence is solid. But it might drag things out for a while. You need to be careful. That night, I could barely sleep. The thought of Derek fighting to rewrite the ending made my skin crawl. But even worse was the creeping feeling that his reach extended beyond prison walls. A week later, I got confirmation. A correctional officer contacted Marcus privately, saying Derek had been writing letters, dozens of them. Some addressed to me, others to Zoe and Caleb, a few even to journalists. Most were intercepted, but the fact that one had reached my home meant someone on the inside was helping him. I filed for a restraining order immediately, just to formalize the barrier between us. Marcus assured me the system would handle it. He's not getting out anytime soon, he said. Try to live your life, Liana. So I tried. I focused on my foundation work, pouring my energy into helping women who needed safe exits from dangerous homes. Each story I heard echoed pieces of my own. Each victory, every woman who escaped, every family who found peace felt like another wound healing inside me. Still, at night, I'd find myself glancing at the window, half expecting to see a shadow that wasn't there. Then, one morning, Marcus called again. I could hear tension in his voice before he even spoke. Liana, you need to sit down. My heart began to race. What happened? There was a transfer, he said. Derek was moved from the state penitentiary to a medical facility for evaluation. During transport, he escaped. The word hit me like ice water. Escaped? Yes, 2 guards injured. They think he had help. I went. Cold all over. I looked toward the kitchen counter at the envelope still sitting there and realized his promise hadn't been empty after all. When I heard that Derek had escaped custody, my blood ran cold. I thought the nightmare was over, but evil doesn't die that easily. When Marcus told me Derek had escaped, I went completely still. The air around me seemed to thicken. Even the ocean outside the window fell silent. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My brain refused to accept the words. Escaped. That wasn't supposed to be possible. How? I finally whispered. They were transporting him to a hospital for evaluation, Marcus said. He complained of chest pains. Halfway there, he overpowered a guard and disappeared into the woods off Highway 92. And now? They've launched a full manhunt. But, Liana, he hesitated. The warden thinks someone on the inside helped him. He may have resources. My heart started pounding so fast I thought I might faint. Derek had resources before. Money hidden in offshore accounts. Contacts who owed him favors. He wasn't just running, he was coming. Within hours, the police arrived at my safe house. 2 plainclothes officers checked the property, installed motion sensors, and told me to stay inside. He's probably long gone, one of them said, trying to sound reassuring. But his eyes told another story. He was scared for me. Talia came over that night, refusing to leave. She brought a duffel bag full of clothes and her baseball bat from college. If he's out there, he's not getting near you, she said. I tried to smile. You really think that bat's gonna stop him? No, she said, gripping it tighter. But it'll make me feel better. We barely slept. Every creak of the house sent adrenaline surging through my veins. At one point, the motion light outside flicked on, and I nearly screamed. It was just a raccoon. But by dawn, my nerves were shot. 2 days passed. Then 3. The police released no updates. Reporters were camped outside my foundation office, desperate for a quote. I stayed hidden, watching from behind curtains. The world was fascinated again. The woman who survived her husband's murder plot, now hunted by the same man who'd tried to kill her. Marcus called every few hours. They think he's still in the state, he said. There've been sightings near the coast. Stay put, Liana. Please. But staying still felt like waiting to die. On the 5th night, the first letter arrived. No envelope this time, just a folded sheet of paper slid under the front door. My blood ran cold when I saw the handwriting. You shouldn't have burned the photo. I dropped the paper as if it were on fire. Talia picked it up with trembling hands, scanning it quickly. He's here, she whispered. He's been watching. The police came again, took the note, dusted for prints. Nothing. No clues. They stationed a patrol car down the road, but I knew it wasn't enough. Derek had always been 2 steps ahead. That night, I packed a small bag passport, cash, and the flash drive of evidence I still kept hidden. Marcus arranged a temporary relocation under a new alias. You'll be safer out of the country for a while, he said. I have a contact in Vancouver who can help. But before leaving, I needed closure. The kind that only facing the past could bring. So I did something reckless. I drove back to my old hometown to the cemetery where they'd buried an empty casket with my name on it. It was late afternoon when I arrived. The sky was bruised purple, the air heavy with salt and rain. My fake headstone stood crooked in the damp earth, the inscription half worn by weather, Liana Brooks' beloved wife and designer. Forever missed. I stood there staring at it, the irony twisting inside me. Forever missed by no one who had truly loved me. I knelt down, brushing dirt from the stone, and whispered, "You buried the wrong woman." For a long moment, I just stayed there, listening to the wind. Then I heard it, the soft crunch of gravel behind me. I froze. At first, I thought it was the wind again, or maybe an animal. But then a voice, low, familiar, venomous, sliced through the quiet. "Hello, Lee." My breath caught. Slowly, I turned. Derek stood a few yards away, thinner than before but still radiating that same cold control. His prison uniform had been replaced by jeans and a dark jacket. His eyes, those same calculating eyes, locked on mine. "I told you," he said softly. "You can't get rid of me." Every instinct screamed run, but my feet refused to move. The grave between us felt like a line I couldn't cross. "You shouldn't be here," I said, my voice barely steady. He smiled, tilting his head. "Neither should you." I noticed the faint tremor in his hands, the exhaustion beneath his bravado. He'd been running, hiding, desperate, but desperation made him dangerous. "What do you want, Derek?" I asked. He took a slow step closer. "You took everything from me. My money, my name, my life. I just want to talk." "You tried to kill me," I snapped. He shrugged. "And yet, here we both are alive. Maybe we were meant to finish this face to face." The police were still an hour away, at least. I knew if I made a move, he'd follow. So I kept him talking, inching backward toward the car. "You're sick," I said. He smiled again. "Maybe, but I'm free, and so are you for now." He reached into his jacket, and my heart seized. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out another folded piece of paper. He tossed it onto the grave. "Read it when I'm gone," he said. "Then you'll understand." Before I could speak, he turned and disappeared between the trees. I stood there trembling, waiting for the sound of footsteps to fade completely before I collapsed to my knees. When I finally dared to unfold the note, it said only one sentence. "You and I both know this isn't the end." I folded it carefully, slid it into my pocket, and called Marcus with shaking hands. "He found me," I whispered. "Where are you?" "At my grave." Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Police swarmed the cemetery, searching the woods, but Derek was gone again, vanished into the dark like a ghost that refused to stay buried. That night, back at the safe house, I sat by the window unable to sleep. The moon hung low over the water, pale and watchful. Talia slept on the couch, her bat leaning against the wall. I knew I couldn't keep running forever. Derek was out there wounded, obsessed, unfinished, and the only way to truly end this nightmare was to face it one last time. As I stood by the window, I realized he was right about one thing: it wasn't the end. Not yet. I faced my past not with fear, but with the calm of someone who has already died once. After the night at the cemetery, I couldn't pretend anymore. The illusion of safety I'd built, new name, new home, new life, was cracked wide open. Derek was out there somewhere, and until I looked him in the eye one last time, I'd never be free. Marcus wanted me flown out of the country immediately. "You're not safe here, Liana. He's desperate," he said, pacing my kitchen. But I shook my head. "Running won't fix this. He'll keep finding me. It has to end here." He looked at me for a long time, finally realizing there was no changing my mind. "Then we'll do it on your terms," he said quietly. "But you're not doing this alone." 2 days later, the police tracked Derek's movements to a fishing town an hour south. He'd been spotted near the docks, sleeping in abandoned shacks, stealing food. The plan was simple. I'd lure him out. Not with fear, with finality. I recorded one last message, just in case. "If you're watching this, it means the story is finally over," I said into Marcus's camera. "And I hope it ends with peace." I told Marcus and Talia to wait half a mile away, with the police hidden along the bluff. If Derek showed, they'd move in. The ocean was glass smooth, the horizon painted pink and gold. I stood barefoot in the surf, the salt air biting at my lungs, and then, like a shadow forming out of the fog, he appeared. He looked nothing like the man I'd married: gaunt, sunburned, eyes hollow. But the hatred in them was the same. "You knew I'd find you," he said. "Yes," I replied. My voice didn't shake. He smiled faintly. "You never could resist closure." He stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. "All this time," he murmured, "I thought about what I'd say if I saw you again. I thought maybe I'd beg. Maybe I'd kill you. But now I just want to understand." "Understand what?" "How you could destroy everything we built." I laughed softly, not cruelly, just tired. "We didn't build anything, Derek. You built a cage. I just finally learned how to open the door." For a moment, he looked almost sad. Then his expression hardened. "You ruined me." "You ruined yourself," I said. I just turned on the lights. The wind whipped between us, carrying the sound of approaching sirens, faint, but growing. He heard them too. His shoulders tensed. "You called them," he said. "I called justice," I answered. "Same thing." He laughed then. A low, broken sound. "Justice? You think they can cage me forever? I'll always be a part of you, Lee. You'll see me every time you close your eyes." I met his gaze steadily. "No, Derek. I'll see the woman who survived you." He took a step forward, and for a heartbeat I thought he might rush me. But then the red and blue lights spilled over the dunes. Officers shouted commands. He froze, hands twitching at his sides. "Don't move," a voice ordered. Derek turned to me one last time. "You win," he said softly, "but you'll never forget me." "I don't need to," I whispered. "You're the reason I know who I am." He didn't resist when they cuffed him. For the first time, he looked small, just a man stripped of power, swallowed by the dawn. As they led him toward the cars, He glanced back once. I didn't. Talia ran to me, wrapping me in a hug so tight it hurt. Marcus followed, his relief visible in the slump of his shoulders. It's over, he said. I watched the horizon. No, I said quietly. It's beginning. The weeks that followed felt lighter. Derek was transferred back to maximum security, this time under constant surveillance. His new sentence, life without parole. I attended the final hearing, not out of duty, but to close the circle. When the judge read the decision, Derek didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, hollow. The battle was over. Afterward, I visited the women's shelter funded by the Phoenix Fund. They'd painted a mural on one wall, a giant phoenix rising from ashes, wings spread across the bricks. Underneath, in small letters, it read, "You are not what was done to you." I stood there for a long time, tears finally coming. For the first time, they weren't tears of fear or grief, they were release. Life slowly found its rhythm again. I moved to a small coastal town 2 hours north, where no one knew my story. I bought a cottage with ivy on the porch and white shutters that creaked in the wind. I started gardening, something I'd never had time for before. Every seed I planted felt like a promise to myself, to grow, to live, to forgive, even if forgiveness was mostly for me. Talia visited often, bringing laughter back into my home. Marcus stayed in touch, more like family than a lawyer now. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, we'd sit on the porch and watch the sun sink into the ocean. I still can't believe it's really over, Talia said one night, sipping tea. I smiled faintly. It's not over. It's just rewritten. The stars came out one by one, and the sea murmured softly in the dark. I closed my eyes, breathing in salt and freedom. For the first time in years, the air didn't taste like fear. Later that night, I walked down to the water alone. The moonlight turned the waves silver. I took the last letter Derek had ever written, the one I'd kept, unopened, and tossed it into the tide. The paper darkened, curled, and vanished beneath the surface. "Goodbye, Derek," I whispered. "You don't own my story anymore." The wind carried my words out to sea, scattering them across the waves. I watched until the horizon swallowed the last trace of the letter, until the only thing left was the sound of water and my own heartbeat, steady, alive, mine. I turned to walk home, my footprints fading behind me in the sand. The woman they buried was gone. The woman who walked away from that shore was something else entirely stronger, freer, unbreakable. And as I whispered goodbye to the waves, I knew that the woman they buried was gone, but the one who rose afterward would never be broken again.